So we're going to start. My name is Sebastian Vidal. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of the Puerto Rico Science, Technology and Research Trust. It's a true honor to be here in this very interesting discussion about a digitalization plan of Puerto Rico. I'm going to start just welcoming in Spanish, and then I'm going to switch to English. Bienvenidos a todos los que se están conectando. Estamos comenzando en un par de minutos en una discusión virtual acerca de un plan para la digitalización de Puerto Rico y del gobierno. So first of all, I'm extremely excited of participating and moderating this panel. I think everything that we're going to be discussing here is critical for the present and future of the island and any country in general. So I have the great honor to share a brief biography of our amazing guests today. So I would like to start off with Mr. Aaron Snow. Aaron Snow is CEO of the Canadian Digital Service CDS, the Canadian government's team mandated to improve federal service delivery. CDS mainstreams new ways of designing and delivering digital services that reduce the risk of project failure, lower cost, ensure user privacy and system security, and above all, improve people's lives by putting their needs front and center. CDS leads by example, most recently shipping software like Canada's COVID Alert app and GC Notify. So before moving to Canada, Aaron was the Presidential Innovation Fellow under President Barack Obama, focusing on technology procurement, and then co-founded and led 18F, one of the United States government's two digital services team. He also served as a Deputy Commissioner and Senior Advisor for the U.S. Government's Technology Transformation Service, TTS. Welcome, Aaron. So the next guest is it's a local, and I'm sure probably most of the guys that are connecting know about him. His name is Giancarlo Gonzalez. Es un empresario en serie, quien ha fundado, creado y vendido exitosas empresas en el sector de tecnología, como socio fundador de MA Web Group, donde desarrolló una serie de productos digitales en el mercado de bienes raíces, Listamax, Tasamax y compraalquila.com, revolucionando la industria en Puerto Rico. MA Web Group fue adquirida por el grupo GFR en el año 2012. De 2013 a 2015, González incursionó al sector público, comprometido con modernizar e innovar las estrategias de tecnología del gobierno y posicionar la tecnología como un ente de desarrollo económico. Logró además adelantar un gobierno más eficiente en los servicios que provee a la ciudadanía. La oficina de González ganó el premio Civic de entidad gubernamental del año en junio del 2015. Actualmente, Giancarlo trabaja con gobiernos y ONG en diversas jurisdicciones, asesorando sobre cómo mejorar la entrega de diversos servicios al ciudadano y desarrollando soluciones digitales a esos fines. Desde Piloto 151 está activo, además en el desarrollo de talento y promoviendo inversión en el ecosistema tecnológico en Puerto Rico, y participa en iniciativas comunitarias Cívica Digital desde Code for Puerto Rico. And I would like to add to that he is a writer, and he recently released a book called From Intention to Action, a plan for the digitalization of Puerto Rico, which of course he's going to be mentioning later on, and I highly recommend to buy it on Amazon. So now I have the pleasure to introduce the leader behind the Puerto Rico Science, Technology and Research Trust, the Chief Executive Officer of the Trust, Lucy Crespo, who would like to share a few words. Lucy, thanks for joining us and all our guest speakers.
Well, good morning to all of you. I really hope that you are safe and healthy. And thank you again for joining this conversation about this very relevant topic about the digitalization or digital transformation plan for Puerto Rico. The Puerto Rico Science, Technology and Research Trust is a non-for-profit organization created by law in 2004 to address and move forward Puerto Rico innovation agenda, including the responsibility of deploying science, technology, research, and development policy. Our 2015 strategic plan had the ultimate objective of increasing Puerto Rico innovation capacity. The mission of the trust is one to invest, facilitate, and build the capacity to continually advance Puerto Rico economy and its citizens' well-being through innovation-driven enterprises, science, technology, and working with our industrial base. After Irma and Maria hurricanes, and most recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are more than ever committed to facilitate efforts to enable and ensure that all the residents of Puerto Rico can take advantage of the well-documented socioeconomic benefits afforded by digitalization, such as telehealth, telemedicine, distance learning, and remote work. We are convinced that the digital economy is one of the most single important drivers of innovation, competitiveness, and growth. And it really holds a tremendous potential to create a small and medium business enterprise. So it's really a unique opportunity from entrepreneurs, and in particular, we feel it's a unique opportunity for entrepreneurs in Puerto Rico. We are at the Trust, we are committed to continue working with all the members of our innovation ecosystem to enhance Puerto Rico information and communication technology policies, infrastructure, and processes, so we can be sure that we maximize these technologies for economic and community development. Again, I want to express my deepest appreciation to Aaron, to Giancarlo, and to Sebastian that put all this conversation together. And I feel this is going to be the first of many conversations that we are going to be hosting at the Trust to facilitate that we really move forward the agenda to achieve these objectives for Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, Amir, and thank you for those words. And I completely agree that this is critical for our island and Puerto Rico. I am, before we kick off, I would like to share that I'm very passionate about how innovation can solve the most fundamental challenges of our society. How does this impact the life of our citizens, which is, our mission at the Science Trust. So that being said, government services is not only a local challenge, but a global challenge. That's why I really like this topic. That is one of the reasons why I took over the role of Chief Innovation Officer of the Science Trust, to accelerate the digital agenda among the trust programs, identify resources, establishing collaborations and services, and a facilitator to strengthen the business ecosystem of the island. So having been part directly or indirectly in more than 5 different administrations has given me the opportunity to witness, with my own eyes and experience the hard way how important it is to nurture, foster, and push for a digital government transformation. So when I was reading the Giancarlo's book, I was imagining a world where you don't need to go to a government office ever again. Imagine that the interactions that you have as a citizen with the government is as smooth as ordering food through Uber or asking for an Uber, etc. And how relevant is today when we need to be as distant as we can, but we are forced to go physically to an office. So all of that came to mind, and that is just a glimpse of what are the things that we're going to be discussing today. So without further ado, I'll explain a little bit the dynamic. This will work as a panel. So we'll have 3 rounds of questions, and our panelists and guest speakers will have 5 minutes each to answer those questions of each round. And at the end of the panel, we'll have a Q&A. So write down your questions, and at the end, your questions will have the chance to be exposed and ask the the panelists. So write it down, don't forget. I know it's hard when it goes until the end, but you can do this. So again, thank you everyone, and we're going into the first round. I think, being in Puerto Rico, it's one of the first questions that arise when we talk about digitalization and how governments can improve and use the digital world for the benefit of the citizens. First thing that comes to my mind, for example, is that how we put this issue or become this issue into a priority when there's so many competing factors at the same time. We have, and all of you know, energy problems, emergency, health, food security, financial problems that are always at the top of the list of our governments. So how do we make this a priority with so many competing factors? I would like to start off with you, Aaron, to give you the first step. And thank you again for taking the time to participate in this panel.
So I think it's a great question, and it is really the first question, right? Is how to make this a priority in the face of the quote unquote real spending that needs to happen, and why should anybody care about digitalization? And I think the people here, who probably self-selected into this webinar today, understand the answer intuitively, which is that digital is the enabler of all those other agendas. But there are different ways to talk about it, different ways to look at it, and I think you have to pick and choose what works in different contexts. So let me try to give five alternatives that all might be useful in depending on which stakeholder you're speaking to or which audience you're speaking to. The first and maybe simplest is digital government costs less, so you have more money to spend on all those other priorities. If and when the other shoe drops on the local or the global economy and less tax revenue, governments are going to have to make do with less. Denmark decided 15 years ago to digitalize their government because they thought that if they didn't, soon they wouldn't be able to afford to run their government. And I think that increasingly that's a powerful argument, depending on which way you see the economy winds blowing. Now the trick here, digital government reduces the cost per transaction of services and so on. The trick here is getting to that more efficient digital government requires investment. So you need a government that thinks it can get a return on that investment before their next election, or a government that's willing to do the right thing and invest beyond that next election. So the second lens I would take is that digital government reduces the risk of project failure. It reduces the risk that the money you do spend on technology and on services will be ill spent. There is plenty of evidence that the larger the IT project, the more likely it is to fail, and that the key drivers to success or failure are first and foremost just the size of the project, and then somewhat less so, but also important, the use of modern agile development techniques versus traditional waterfall techniques that are well understood not to apply well in the beginning stages and early maturation stages of service development. The third lens that I suggest is that digital government increases confidence and trust in government. So President Kennedy once said that the basis of effective government is public confidence. You've seen the result of government systems that are not designed with users in mind, first and foremost. They're difficult to use. They don't inspire confidence. Instead, they inspire dread and disdain. People, sometimes would rather just phone or just show up in person than deal with a terrible, frustrating web page and no recourse, and feel at the mercy of technology. The fourth lens, I think, which is related, is digital government is more adaptable and resilient government. And with the pace of change increasing, in this moment more than ever, government has to be adaptable quickly and reliably. Or if you want to put it in a more overtly political light, your political leaders want your government systems to be responsive to their shifting priorities, right? And you can't do that if your system takes months or years to change and is fragile and may break in unpredictable ways when you change it. So you want to invest in being able to turn quickly with the times. And then finally, fear is a wonderful, powerful motivator. old systems fail and old systems are insecure. And do you want an important government benefit system to fail or get hacked on your watch? Sometimes I think perhaps digital platform projects should get funded from a cybersecurity budget because this is really the underpinning potentiality, right? Nobody wants healthcare.gov to happen on their watch. Nobody wants the Phoenix Pay system like in Canada to happen on their watch. Different digital service teams internationally have taken different paths to earning that trust. GDS in the UK recreated the government's homepage and information system. USDS fixed healthcare.gov. The common thread through all of this, whether you're going to use fear as a motivator or trust or adaptability or cost, is the strategy is delivery. Right? We've heard that over and over. CDS has tried to use that same strategy during the pandemic. We've built tools for people to sort out which benefits are available to them. We've accelerated the development of a thing called Canada Notify, which is a tool that gives departments what they need to keep the public informed and make their services more transparent very easily and cheaply. And we built this COVID alert app that millions of Canadians are now using to be notified if they may have been exposed to someone who's tested positive for coronavirus. Whatever your opportunities are, and they will be opportunistic. You start with demonstrating what digital is capable of. And sometimes it's going to take multiple rounds of that. Sometimes you're going to need to build brick by brick that confidence. If you're lucky, it comes all at once, and you get a huge budget that's commensurate with the size of the task of transforming a government to be a digital-first government. More often than not, internationally, the path has been more stepwise, and the key is delivery. It's really as simple as that in some cases.
Thank you, Aaron. I think I definitely follow you, and I think what you said about how important it is to demonstrate that. It's weird that people use many apps in a daily basis, but then when they go to government, they don't expect that, and I think that's the key right there. Thank you very much, Lucy. You have been involved in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector. You have a long understanding of what's happening in Puerto Rico. Why this is not a priority?
I have to say that the first one is that you have to really start with policy, and that is one area that we definitely have a lot of opportunities, ¿verdad? In Puerto Rico, and I really hope that now that the trust has for 5 years agenda, strategic plan have addressed some of the more basic foundation that we can take a more significant role in working with our members in the ecosystem and people that do understand the importance of having clear policy. For example, just how to be open, and how we all need to ensure that we are transparent and that we are open with the information that we measure. Everything that we do, so we understand what is the progress that we have to make. So for me, that is one of the most important things that we all have to come in agreement in Puerto Rico, that it is very important to share information, that there is absolutely nothing to start measuring things, and if you measure, you can improve. If you never measure, you can never improve anything. So that for me is the first one that we need to take. The second one is that we need to have a strong infrastructure, and we have to acknowledge that one of the difficulties that happen in Puerto Rico is that we have two major hurricanes that actually, devastated a lot of work that have been put in place, like the Giancarlo, for example, was the CDO. He worked with the Internet Society, which is a key group of people in Puerto Rico in this matter, and they put together a mapping of what are the capabilities that we have, for example, in broadband infrastructure, which is a key element, okay? We kind of lost everything. We now have a unique opportunity, which is that we are rebuilding a lot of that. So as we rebuild, for a more resilient Puerto Rico, we need to rebuild for a more resilient Puerto Rico in terms of broadband access and communication. We need to have that plan together. There is a national plan. We need to have one at the local level that starts saying, what is the ambition, the inspirational goal that we have for all the Puerto Rican people to have equal access to information. And then from there, you can start deploying a lot of innovation, in particular in terms of developing new services and new economic development opportunities, which is the way that I see. For me, one of the major reasons for this is that we need to have, even at the communities level, Puerto Rico needs to have access to that infrastructure so they can receive the services and they can develop their business opportunities as a result, have a better life of well-being. So I believe it is a matter of start putting all the pieces together, coming in agreement, and then have a plan. It doesn't have to be a perfect plan, but it has to be a plan that you measure and you make progress and course correction as you move forward.
So thank you, Lucy, for that. I completely agree with the broadband, and the infrastructure is so important for our economic development, but also education. In these days, so hard to find on the internet to get virtual classes. So Giancarlo, you mentioned this in many parts of your book. How do we make this a priority, and why is not a priority today?
I think to make it a priority, we need to educate mainly our leaders, and that's across every level, at the executive level and people that aspire to go to our legislature. We need leaders to understand that the policy will not work unless the technology works. And the technology will not work if the policy is not designed with digital thinking at the table when leaders are doing the planning and the thinking. We talk about energy, responding to an emergency, providing health services. All of these have one common denominator: using digital capabilities effectively to deliver functional services that respond to people's needs. That same expectation when we hit a button and expect an Uber to arrive. Where is that response in our unemployment benefits, in managing our COVID outbreak? Our incoming candidates talk about speeding up the permit process, and it's a recurring theme every 4 years. We just went through a permit overhaul during this administration, and the result was dropping 10 points in the Doing Business Index. Why did it fail? I highlight in the book a presentation by Cecilia Munoz, who served as Senior Public Policy Director under President Obama. And in her message during the reconstruction of Puerto Rico, she says that you don't just need technical capacity to make sure government functions as well as Uber and Amazon. You don't just need to build things, you need to apply technology thinking to how the government works. And you need that thinking at the table when you are doing the policy, when you are doing the planning, when you are doing the thinking. People need to understand through a digital lens what people do. And I put together the best practices of a global network of digital government enthusiasts who have worked in leadership positions, leading effective digital transformations around the world. And we share case studies as well for analysis of over a dozen plans that we've developed in the last 12 years to present a roadmap. Because since 2009, our leaders have been talking about technology problems, and for 3 administrations, we have failed to meet citizens' expectations with respect to digital provision of services. And I think that we may find answers in what Cecilia said. It is not a question of creating isolated elements to solve particular problems, but of adopting a vision, a digital paradigm that will allow us to transform our performance from the ground up.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned, what the 3 of you mentioned, are very complementary in a sense that you mentioned education to our leaders, and Aaron mentioned at the beginning investment. And I think my second goals related to those 2 topics is like, how do we make sure that when an administration changes, that usually, like they like to change what the previous administration did, we stick to it. We stick to that strategy. And more importantly, we allocate the resources and the investment that is necessary to keep that strategy going in the long run. So I don't know if anyone wants to start, but I can go ahead and start with Aaron.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, getting that investment is it's the trick, right? It's the whole trick. Because it's a, you know, there priorities are in play, and like
okay,
you said, the first question, the folks who are in charge of making the investment or not making the investment, they want to know, what are we going to get for it, and when are you going to be able to show it to me, right? In the best case, right? I mean, you know, putting aside folks who want to invest on, you know, on corruption or whatever else, right? But in the normal case, folks are looking for, all right, if you're asking for this money to do this thing different, and you're asking me to put some political capital behind it too, and you're asking me to make changes, what am I going to get for it? What are we going to get for it? And that's going to run up against a couple things. It's going to run up against the incentives and the structures in the existing government, and the people who are in charge of the budget buckets, and the people who have the authorities over the various parts of government, the various services and benefits, and you need to be able to align all of that, right? So, you know, and the really easiest answer, I like to think, in a good world, is you get the money by demonstrating that the money is going to be well spent, right? And so, you know, rolls back to the strategy is delivery. You know, the follow on to that is all governments want capable, adaptable teams working for them. All governments want to get more results for less money. No government wants to be caught flat-footed when an important system fails. They don't want that on their watch. So, you know, that kind of investment can survive. It can survive across, you know, political changes, if it's robust and if it's demonstrating success. I will say, like, there is a tendency to put the money into departmental budgets without investing enough centrally in digital platforms and tools and resources that those departments need, in the tools and help they need to set the proper outcome metrics. Lucy mentioned you cannot overstate how important it is that you have to measure what it is you're trying to improve, right? And the stakeholders understand this bit, right? I find that the stakeholders at the very highest level have a pretty good understanding of needing to have crisp, measurable outcomes. It's down further into government where that gets more uncomfortable, right? Because people don't like to report outcomes that aren't great. But it has to be a political priority to say so. But like I said, you know, that needs to come from the center, right? Otherwise the responsibility and the accountability for it is dispersed across lots of different departments, and it varies. And when you have a heavy hand of departmental investing, not that it's not important, it is important. But there also has to be that central set of resources, platforms, tools, so that instead of redundant one-off investment, instead of all the departments solving their own, you know, reinventing the wheel, you know, you think like a connected organization, right? And you make sure you're investing in a good team in the center that can deliver those tools that help those departments and makes doing the right thing for those departments the easy thing to do. Yeah. I mean, it'll sound a little too simple, but it's true that governments that have gone far in digitalization have invested in digitalization of the whole of government, not the separate digitalization of each fiefdom within each department.
I can add to
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
Great. Going into what Aaron just said, it's essential to recognize that technology and that digital infrastructure is a central pillar in governing effectively. And to that end, it's inappropriate that its financing be ad hoc, which would lend itself to programs not having continuity and continuous funding, or that money is provided only when funds are available for a specific project. Then
Yes.
they launch it, and then the funds are gone, and they don't delivering a service digitally is constant. It doesn't end. And they're never really finished. So this is why it's important to educate at the legislative level, which is part of what I propose in the book. We present creating a digital commission tied at the legislature, responsible for reviewing all legislation tied to digital services. Legislation to improve the permit process, for example, must be focused on accelerating the way that each agency learns about and uses the feedback on the services it offers so that they can continue to make it better. And if you see it this way, as creating a culture of learning so that you can then continue improving that service, then the funding turns into continuous as well. I also think that we have to communicate successful projects better. We focus too much on just launching a program and call it a success, and then we forget about it. But how is the project doing a month later, 3 months later? How many people have adopted it? How many people have benefited from it? If we communicate the success of digital projects continuously, then people will be aware of them and they won't be replaced by another supplier for political reasons, for contractual reasons, or it won't be discontinued, right? We need to know that over 600,000 people have downloaded the Crespo Digital app and that it's actually working for faster services at the DMV. Not many people know that we do have successful projects and we need to start communicating that better.
Yes, I believe that this is one of the biggest challenges. But on the other hand, I'm a very positive person, and I have to say that, one of the things that happened during this COVID-19 pandemic is that we have probably the highest rate of adoption of technology in the shortest period of time in history. That is a reality. This COVID pandemic has really changed the mindset, and I believe everything has to start with the mindset. For me, it's very clear that all the government candidates that we have today, in their mindset, they have that they need to start using technology to enable, not only a better government, but also a better country and a better economic development, a better well-being of the citizens. So for me, that is a gain under this situation, because as someone mentioned in the chat, everything really starts with the leadership. So that for me is important. We also have some other things that are different maybe than another time, which I believe is putting us in a better position to move forward. One of them is that we have now an approved fiscal plan for Puerto Rico that there is, is under the Fiscal Oversight Board, and they have really specified areas for investment. And as many of you know, and I believe I know Giancarlo well explained that in his book, there is a specific assignment to address some of these issues, okay? So that for me is another very positive point. The second one is that we, especially for the government portion, there have been an effort to staff and provide budget and funding for the PRIT, so they can start working in more specific projects across the government to enable digitalization. And the last one that I'm going to mention, and what I believe is very important, is that the private sector, in particular, organizations as us and so many others in Puerto Rico that are in the nonprofit organization, need to take a more active role in enable programs that work based on technologies and digitalization, okay? In our particular case, we last year received participated in a competitive grant at the nation level for a telemedicine grant that Puerto Rico had not done in 10 years. We were fortunate we got last year, and we are looking forward to get it this year. And again, this is a step-by-step looking in opportunities in which the private sector can help to facilitate that we start redefining processes and how we access services based on technology. The same applies from distant learning. We are working in agricultural programs, looking into how we insert more technology, more artificial intelligence, to be more productive. For example, we recently have been looking at a program that was deployed in Santo Domingo, nearby Puerto Rico, in case I'm sure he's familiar. But they did an outstanding deployment of artificial intelligence just to using meteorological information to improve the use of water, and they reduce the use of water in agricultural usage in 30%. It's only one region. So I believe that the private sector need to take a step over and start taking more responsibility for facilitating programs. I mean, we all have to work together because we cannot wait. The government needs to redefine, transform the use of digital information to provide better services and information for their citizens. And at the same time, the private sectors and not-for-profit organizations need to step up and start also implementing programs doing exactly the same.
We need that type of mindset, but also we need a positive mindset, which you mentioned. All of the resources that are available and are going to be available, we need to embrace it as a country. So, I want to keep with you, Lucy, and give you the moderator mic, so you can go with the last questions, and we go to the Q&A.
What I would like to do now as a moderator is ask you guys, how do you think, or how do you feel? How did you link the digital strategy with economic development, and in particular, how that strengthens the ecosystem of startup technology investment on the island? So, Sebastian, if you want to start talking about that, given that you are one of the key players of this ecosystem, I will appreciate it.
Perfect. No, and just to give a little bit of background to the audience, I used to run a local program called Parallel 18 that actually help and support startups, technology startups, and innovative startups to scale, starting from Puerto Rico elsewhere. So I would say that it's critical, and because of three things. First, governments are an essential part of innovation ecosystem development, and if that link's not working, the whole circle is not going to be working. So I think it's a critical part. In Parallel 18, I think most of the entrepreneurship or startup policies need to address how do we include underrepresented founders, underrepresented startups into the startup ecosystem. And I think having a digital strategy with things like broadband infrastructure will allow programs like us and many other entrepreneurship initiatives, even in the government sector, private sector, or nonprofit sector, will allow to democratize those initiatives so more people can start building their own businesses, not only in the capital, but elsewhere. And that will mean that we can reach to more broader and sectors that probably haven't been touched yet by these opportunities. So first thing is, I think democratizes the opportunity to start up in general. Second, I think markets will have a better access if we use digitalization to get access from. So it's like, if I want to work startup in transportation, for example, or in agriculture, if the infrastructure is ready and the government allows me to, and sometimes step out of the way or make it really easy to come up with an idea and a solution, I think that will help tremendously to create more innovation in those sectors like transportation, water, energy, health, finance, emergency, among others. And there's a few examples actually in Giancarlo's book that related to how in Israel, in transportation sector, you can build solutions out of that. So I think that's the second point. And I think the third one is about research. There's many research that it was built and it was created out of government allowing people to have access to their data and to their platform. So I think research, which is something that the Science Trust is pushing so hard for many years, with this type of strategies could be highlighted. So I think those are the 3 points.
Thank you, Sebastian, for that insights. Giancarlo, do you want to share your point of view on this one?
Yes, tying technology to economic development is part of the mission. If you look at, for example, and it's an example that I highlight in the book, I mentioned Estonia's identity platform called X-Road, which is the bedrock of all their e-government transactions, and it's estimated to save citizens the time equivalent of 842 years per year of time for people. Think about that. They save you so much time because you don't need to visit a government agency for anything. I am sure our citizens can relate to that. Hours in voting registration, in unemployment calls, in registering a newborn, in getting a school transcript. The list is endless. Economic development starts with having the time to work on what matters. When the government consumes that time from us, it limits our ability to create value. So government platforms would not only just save us time, that's half the story. They also enable citizens to be part of the solution and create more innovation. And I mentioned the work of the economist Mariana Mazzucato. She highlights in her book, Entrepreneurial State, how the iPhone wouldn't be possible without state investments like GPS and the internet and lithium batteries. That was innovation created by the Department of Energy, and the touchscreen innovation. All of these technologies were created with public funding. Where is our public digital infrastructure from Puerto Rico to support economic growth and innovation? We have engineers in NASA. We have engineers at Google. Where are our engineers inside our government creating these platforms that then the private sector can leverage to build better services? I think we need our economists who have a large voice in Puerto Rico to play a role in that digital component and become a spokesperson for that as well.
Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that Estonian example. I'm also always so impressed of, how, because one of the things that people don't understand is when you have that time, you not only can use that for creativity, innovation, economic development, but also, to extend your well-being and, to have more free time for yourself and take care of yourself. So Adam, please share with us your point of view of this particular comment.
Sure. So it's the last question, so I want to thank you for having me before I lose the opportunity, and thank you, Giancarlo, for writing this book and pushing this rock up this hill. You can't understate how important it is. You can't overstate how important it is. A couple thoughts about digital strategy and economic development. The first, Giancarlo is exactly right that part of digitalization of government is making people's and businesses' interactions with government more frictionless. This is also, by the way, one really good way to talk about prioritization and investment with stakeholders, which is that you can nail that. This is where the outcome metric can be very clear. You can measure what the cost per transaction is for each of the interactions that people have with government, and you can get very real with everyday people about some of your goals, about what digitalization really will mean for them. It should mean things like not having to sit on hold on a phone for half an hour to find out the status of your application or your permit, or a lot of people don't even have desktop computers or laptops anymore, let alone printers or fax machines, that they need to deal with paper and PDFs. It should mean not having, a different username and a different password with different rules across all the different services the government is providing. Maybe folks think of things like taxes, where the government knows perfectly well how much you owe or are owed in taxes. So why should you spend hours filling out a form that tells government what it already knows? And these are the everyday things, right? That give people more trust and faith in government when they feel like government is reacting, is respecting their time and their effort, and you can calculate how much the reduced cost per transaction will save over time, right? Second thing, building on the ecosystem question is another core part of digitalization is more open government, more open data, and more open systems. And government sits on treasure troves of data, at least data that is that looks like treasure to certain people and to certain kinds of businesses and organizations. And making that data available and consumable and useful unlocks all kinds of value that you don't even perceive until someone else sees it. And private organizations, nonprofits, other individuals can use that data to make people's lives better, to help government make people's lives better, and so on. The last thing I want to say is just that one of the intersections is in the procurement space, and one of the things that lots and lots of governments have struggled with is how to be a really smart buyer of digital services. There is actually a fair amount of good work internationally about how to think differently about how you buy digital services as a government. And one thing I will note is that there's lots to say about it. I won't get into details, but one thing I will note is that investing locally is a big win-win-win kind of situation. It's always more appealing politically to invest locally. Investing locally means smaller businesses are getting more of the money, and local and small businesses are going to feel more invested and more accountable and more responsible for producing real results that they can demonstrate to those around them without leaving government offices high and dry. Can't emphasize enough the role that not just pouring money. There is an instinct sometimes maybe to just pour money into a situation, right? And then and to Giancarlo's point, not necessarily follow up on whether the money is being well spent. And that requires some careful thinking and planning about what it means to follow up with the procurement and how you construct a procurement to make sure that you can hold vendors accountable for the right kinds of things in the right way. And actually, and when we've had conversations with vendors, about this question, boy, are they excited about the prospect of government buying differently, because most governments don't want to sell and work under the constructs that a lot of governments have in terms of the very waterfall, very detail-oriented at the outset, very milestone-driven development that doesn't allow digital service vendors to do what they do well, which is help institutions think through problems and then iterate, starting with prototypes and take to scale rather than planning the whole thing before they've learned enough. So just a few notes about procurement. There's lots more to say, but all of that contributes to the economic development of your constituency too.
I just want to take the opportunity also here just to mention that one thing that I feel we can also take a lot of opportunities in Puerto Rico is by assessing the funds of the small business innovation grants as well as the technology transfer grant, which they have available, and that can be a tremendous component for startup business to try, as you were mentioning, their prototypes or service delivery and digital transformation. So Sebastian, back to you as a moderator.
So we're gonna get to the Q&A. I have seen questions in the comments and questions in the Q&A. I will ask if you put a question in the chat to put it in the Q&A so I can have it there all in order. Giancarlo, we're going to start with you. I think you have a question, specific questions, and then we'll go to the audience.
Could you talk about these factors for your success in Canada? Particularly, you were very successful with the unemployment benefits process there. And lessons learned on what pitfalls we should avoid moving forward.
Oh boy, there's hours and hours of that, right? The departments that handled the emergency relief benefit handle the emergency relief benefits for Canada under the pandemic. An interesting thing happens when institutions that are used to very careful planning and approval suddenly need to work very, very quickly, which is the balance between policy and planning and the exigency of needing a result shifts dramatically, right? So we saw that in April in Canada, where in just a few weeks, the benefits department responsible was able to start pushing the emergency relief benefit out to millions and millions of Canadians. They did that. The most important thing they did, in my view, was that they stopped worrying so much about making sure that everybody was absolutely checking every box and eligible under a complex set of criteria before they would start to disperse the benefit. So lots of benefit systems in Canada and elsewhere have a lot of requirements and then do a lot of adjudication and eligibility analysis before dispersing any money. And it's not unreasonable for a government with a set of priorities that includes making sure they never give out money that they're not supposed to give out, right? It's not unreasonable for governments typically to think that way. But we know from the insurance industries, for instance, that when a disability insurance claim is made, typically a decision gets made and money is dispersed or not dispersed in days, not weeks or months. And the reason is that the insurance companies accept a certain amount of risk for a certain low degree of fraud and abuse, but they serve their customers quickly, and then they go and after the fact do a lot more analysis on fraud and abuse, and they can go and try and claw back money and stop funds from flowing and so on. So they have a different balance of the priorities of fast and efficient and high-level customer service because they're in a competitive environment with the need to prevent fraud and abuse. With the emergency relief benefit in the spring, the government institution essentially made a very similar call and said, all right, we're going to just make sure that we can do this. We're going to ask a few questions. We're going to verify a couple data points that we know we can verify within our internal systems. And we're going to move the money, because the important thing right now is to make sure that the money is moving out so that the economy doesn't collapse, so that people can pay their rent, so that people can pay their mortgages, so that people can put food on their table when 20-30% of the country or more is out of work, from at home, etc. That kind of thinking is a really good example of what Giancarlo referred to earlier when he talked about the interplay between policy and technology, right? That digital has to inform policy. It can't just be driven from the top of policy down into implementation anymore. The world doesn't work that way anymore. So I look forward to seeing lots more examples of where government talks about and justifies that kind of different thinking.
I will go ahead with the Q&A. There's many questions actually, and so I don't think we'll have time to go over all of them. But I'm going to start with the ones that I think three of you can answer. The first one, say hello from Puerto Rico. How can we get more pre-college students excited about a career in IT STEM? How can we build the public infrastructure without the talent to back it up? Is there a gap? That's the question from Cassandra here. Related to education and talent, and how do we build that talent pool?
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that there may be some gaps. We may be lacking talent, but we're not at the point where we're lacking it right now. I just think we haven't looked in the right bucket. I talk a lot about our civic tech efforts in Puerto Rico. During the earthquake in the south, it was a group of Coastal Puerto Rico volunteers that built the response site, Suministros PR, to deliver supplies, and it was highlighted by FEMA itself. FEMA said, use this website to list the supplies that are needed and to deliver services to people in need. and it gathered over 500 different refugee camps, and it worked. And it was built by Civic people and volunteers. We have several examples of local community developers that have contributed solutions to Puerto Rico. We are just not broadening the tent of talent that can come into the government and serve using the numerous open source technologies that they know how to use. So first it starts with opening up the participation with people that can contribute with any technology. And once we do that and we show that the opportunity is there, I think that other people will be interested in learning more about those technologies and learning more about the field and having the opportunity to contribute to be part of the solution.
I believe are losing a tremendous opportunity in Puerto Rico, ¿verdad? And the reason is, in Puerto Rico, as you know, we have a significant number of STEM graduates every year, in excess of 20,000 among the top at the nation, in terms of output. But the reality is a significant number of them do leave the island after graduation. So I believe what the major issue that we have here is retention. And the second one is that if we can have retention of those resources, then how do we transform that talent into an economic development power, as I call it? Is how do we provide the opportunity for all those people to create new businesses. The third comment that I have is that there are some opportunities in which we do not have enough talent. One of the areas that we have been fostering certification is, for example, in data science. Data science have become, all the relationship with analytic work have become a tremendous opportunities, because basically you have to do that anywhere that you create or have data, right? So one of the things that we have been working is providing grants for having people take a certification in data science. The other one that, for example, we feel very strong that we need more resources is with geographic information system. That is, having that information is very valuable to create visualization of every project. In the case of the trust of our projects, do have that component. So, for example, one of the projects that we started this year with the Department of Education is that we want to have a GIS certification at the high school level, because we feel it is important that specifically at the pace that technology is changing, some of the traditional education may not work for everyone. There is a significant opportunity for students to get a certification in very specific areas, such as GIS, maybe, Python language, maybe network management, certain technical topics that we need resources. And at the same time, when you get out of school, you already have the ability to generate your own income. So that is one of the areas we just, part of the work that we did during this summer is that we make a proposal using CDBR funding that is under evaluation, precisely to focus on more workforce development in very specific technical areas.
The first is I think that the appeal of having a job that you can do from anywhere is only growing, especially over the last 6 months. And as government becomes more digital, it'll also become more distributed friendly. And so you will have a larger base of folks from which to, it'll be a more appealing career option. And more specifically to the question of whether we can get folks excited about careers in government IT and government STEM, it will be better that way too, because they won't necessarily have to pick up and move to contribute. The other thing I'll say is on that same subject of government IT and STEM is you probably have some folks in government. Everybody has folks in government who are underutilized, but who are ready and capable and would be excited about working differently and thinking differently and using different, and are perfectly capable of picking up the skills that, whatever skill gaps they have, of filling those and being incredibly effective. I think that generally speaking, and it's not anybody's fault, but because of the way incentives are aligned and the way that structures are in place and have evolved, I think a lot of folks in existing government IT roles are underutilized, and I think that makes the job less appealing too. So as you bring that digital mindset to how you work and how your government operations work, it will become a more appealing job.
For me, the most important takeaway I would like for everyone to have, at least from the trust point of view, is that we are convinced that this digital transformation really is the main driver for our future economic growth and development. So it is the source of innovation, competitiveness, and growth. So I think that the most important thing is also that the private sector, I mean, there is a role that the government take. I believe Giancarlo's outlined that very clear in his book of how he visualized that happen. I, on the other hand, have an invitation for the private sector to also step up and start, facilitating and creating this digital transformation in the way that we deliver service, we interact with our community, we create resilience for the community. So, and the way that I see that is to start by doing something, identify a very specific project and, put it on that use. Take the digital technologies and apply and start measuring results and progress. And as you become a study case or a showcase or a role model, more people will do that. And I believe, by adding this small success, you will start to create a culture, because, one of the things that we didn't talk a lot about is that in reality, it's not only leadership, it's not only the infrastructure, it's the opportunity there is a culture that has to be created and enabled. And I believe you do that by having results and a small success.